Hi everybody, and welcome to this, our final webinar in our series for 2012-2013. Today's title is How You Can Use Your Promethean Technology to Help You Achieve Outstanding at Ofsted. Well, what a title for our last webinar, Achieving Outstanding. Achieving Outstanding is really actually hard to define, but the terminology outstanding is provided to us through Ofsted, so the UK governing body for inspectors in schools. And they apply the term outstanding to achieving the highest possible lesson achievement. What I'm actually going to talk to you about today is good classroom practice for any curriculum area. So if you're not based in the UK under the Ofsted system, you'll still pick up tips and tricks that are relevant to you. Now, in writing this webinar, the first thing that I did was look at the government wording for what achieving outstanding was. What does it mean? And what I discovered is lots of literature on how to achieve outstanding and what they're looking for. Here's just a selection. Now, it's lovely and clear, and I'll give you time just to quickly glance through that. But what I've actually done is pick out a few key words that we're going to focus on for the remainder of this session. And like I said, there are lots of sites that offer guidance on this as well. So based on this information, I've picked out 5 key areas which you can use with your interactive whiteboard or technology such as learner response systems that can support you in the classroom and help you to achieve the outstanding grade. Now, these 5 areas are pace, progress, relevance, planning, and finally expectations. So I just want to take a second here, or hopefully a minute, to go through what each of these means in terms of the inspector. So for pace, we instantly think how fast our lessons are progressing, how fast are our students actually working on individual tasks, or on the wider concepts that we're looking at in our classroom. But we also need to think about the pace for everybody. So are all learners working at the same level? Are they all keeping up and making the progress that we desire? And that leads us on nicely to progress, which is basically our students learning. Now, that's a concept, but progress and showing progress can lead some people to think of a tests or exams. But progress is actually just a way of managing the understanding. So if I reword progress to say, are our students understanding, we have a lot more options available to us here. Relevance. Is our content relevant? And we need to think about that in a few different ways. Is it relevant to that particular time period? So up to date. Is it relevant to the student? The age range that they are working at and the level they're working at, and is it relevant to the curriculum that we're teaching them? When it comes to planning, usually we think of how well is our lesson planned. It's not just the lesson plan that the inspector would be looking for, but also the materials that you need. We do need to think about the time that it took us as teachers to reach that point of preparation, and if our long-term and short-term goals match. We also need to think if our plan can be easily altered if our students aren't making the progress that we expected them to make. Or if they're making too much progress and we need to go a bit faster, so we're coming back to progress and pace. Finally, we've got expectations. Are we setting our students achievable expectations? And are they realistic in terms of their particular progress? And importantly, are we communicating them to the students? So we've got loads of information to think about, and all of that is actually really hard to show. When I first started putting this webinar together, I wanted to show each of those 5 areas separately and give you some tips for them all. But what actually happened when I was writing examples is I found it just wasn't that simple. No one example shows just one thing. A good page has elements of 2 or 3, even more, embedded into it. And dependent on how you as the teacher present that work, the emphasis can change. So what I've actually done is put together a series of examples for you. Each should be seen in isolation, but offers you an insight on how you might want to approach the task of achieving outstanding. So the first example we're going to look at is of the containers. And in this example, we're using the containers to check understanding and therefore progress. So a container is basically an action that you place on an object, telling it to contain, hold, in this case, a specific item or not. Now, the lesson behind this would be looking at prime numbers and composite numbers. Do our students understand what that terminology is? So I'm checking their understanding and therefore their progress by allowing our students to come up to the board, select a number, and place it in the appropriate container. So here, that one doesn't work, but if we put it in this one, we have a little reward sound there. So I'm checking that our students have understood the concept, so they've made progress, they didn't know it before the lesson, and I'm giving them a nice reward sound. It's a really nice way of showing praise. Now, containers can be tricky, but we do have a really good active kit on them, as well as some pre-made packs that you can utilise. Now, these packs have all the fiddly settings all sorted out already, and I can show you where to access active tips at the end of the webinar. Now, although in this example it may not be possible for all students to have a go, because I haven't got enough numbers down the bottom, I could either increase the amount of numbers and do one at a time, or I could vote on it. So I could use my learner response system to ask my class, is it A, prime, or B, composite, and get an overall answer. That way I can see if any student is not picking it up. In this example, we're continuing with maths, but here I'm asking students to work out the solution for themselves by discovering the pattern. By moving the numbers from one colour into the opposing, the number will change. If I can pick this number up, there we are. So I've gone from 23 to 10. Now, I'm not going to reveal the answer to the students. This isn't about them just telling me what it is. I actually want them to work out the solution and therefore evidence that they are learning and making progress by understanding the background concepts. What I really like about this example is it's not just about getting to the answer. There's real true learning taking place in the discussions that are happening around the classroom. If I do a couple more, see if anyone can work out what formula, what algebraic formula we are using for our numbers to become from 13 to 5. Or here we've got 11. What would happen if I move my 11 into 4? So the formula that I've used here is actually times 2 add 3. And I'm asking my students to tell me that. So I'm discovering if they can not just recognise patterns, but if they can tell me what they are. Now this example is a simple Venn diagram. Yet another way for students to show you that they've understood or learned the concepts that are involved. Behind the square here I've written some text, which I can bring out and ask my students to place in the most appropriate part of the diagram. So have a definite shape and definite volume. That would have to be a solid, so I'll put that up here, and then bring out another one. Have a definite volume but not a definite shape, and so on and so forth. Now if we did this task at the beginning of the lesson to assess existing knowledge, and then repeated it at the end, we'd be able to evidence what progress has been made. Because you, as a teacher, are in control of the things that are behind the box, we can also differentiate for different classes, different levels, and we can build expectations with our class. If we want to make sure they're achieving specific keywords, we can include them. What I also love about this is that we can save this example as a template. So it saves time on planning as well. So I did say that these examples could be used for multiple things. Now let's look at another concept, magic ink. Now here we're using magic ink just to reveal answers. So I've set a magic ink revealer at the bottom and we're just revealing the answers to the questions. But how you define that particular activity changes how it can be seen. For example, I could set this as a written activity and use the timer up here at the top, so I'm going to set this for 1 minute to keep the pace up. So I've given my students a task and told them how long they have to complete it. What I'm going to do then is get my students to swap books, so then they're marking their peer marking, they're marking someone else's work, and then reveal the answers. So by revealing the answers this way, we're keeping everyone involved because they're marking someone else's work, not their own. We're supporting literacy in terms of reading and writing. And we're telling them beforehand what we expect of them and the time that it takes. So we're setting some really good expectations here. Plus, we're obviously checking on previous knowledge, therefore measuring how much they've understood. And I've still got 15 seconds, but I'm going to move on. This Diamond 9 activity helps you foster some really good discussions in your classroom and really keeps everyone focused and engaged on the task in hand. Now, this is just a model of what we would have physically on the desks for students. So behind the bike, I've hidden the 9 cards that my students might have on their desks. And we're asking them to place those cards in what they think is the most appropriate place on the diagram. So, why did Hitler blitz Britain? If they think that it was to force Britain to surrender, then that is the most important reason he did it. They will put it at the top. If they think it would be the least important, they'd put it in at the bottom, and so on and so forth. Now, by modelling the physical manipulatives, we're getting students to grasp the wider concepts of learning and support those wider life skills of justification and arguing. Not that we want our students to argue with each other, but we want them to have a valid argument. I've also placed some voting buttons on this page because it's interesting to find out if our individual students agree with the whole class consensus. Where did they put it and why? Again, it's a discussion here that's the important part of the learning. Can students not only recite the reasons, but justify their own opinions? It's a great life skill, and what's also brilliant is it translates into the exam process, because what examiners are looking for is a valid argument. So if students walked into this lesson not knowing any of the reasons why Hitler blitzed Britain, and left the classroom knowing that there were 9 different reasons, where they would put them in the order of significance and why, then we're definitely evidencing that our students have made some progress. Okay, sorry about that, I've got everything back to normal again. So what I'm going to do now is actually change tacks a little bit, and I'm going to look at the next couple of examples looking at relevance. So this particular example is about communities and is relevant to the age range that we are supporting as well as the curriculum. What makes it relevant is that when I pull things out from behind here, we're looking at images. These are really good for our younger learners. So we're not using complicated words. I've also placed the activity that the students will be doing at the bottom of the page, again making it accessible to our younger learners. So all of these little things help build up a picture. In this example, we're looking at older learners, and here we're supporting literacy. So what I've done is find some up-to-date examples from a variety of areas so you can see what it's all about. Hopefully you can all see that we've got some really bad grammar here. And what we want to talk about in my class is how grammar can change the meaning of a sentence, or these, for example, these signs. And it's good to use real-life examples to set the scene in your lesson so that our students understand that we're not just teaching them this because it says so in a piece of paper somewhere. It actually has a context to them and their lives. It helps them to be able to relate to it a bit more easily. Now, these types of ideas can span all subjects. It doesn't have to mean extra work for you. So if we look at what's in the news, so at the moment we've had the Egyptian crisis, we've just had Wimbledon, we've got hurricanes happening in Canada, but even focus on that dreaded economy, they all make for really good topics for learning. So if we think outside the box a little bit, how can we support that in our classroom? Now here's what I mean. So here we've got a maths lesson looking at perimeter, but really what I've got is a football field with the meters on. So by using the football pitch, we're actually making it more relevant than if we just use a simple square, or rectangle, apologies. I realise that a football pitch is a rectangle, but it's how our learners view the lesson that has the impact on their learning. Are they seeing this as maths, or could we repeat this in different ways? How can they show their workings out? Could we go and pace it outside to prove the point? So we're bringing in all those different elements of learning and make it relevant to them. We could follow through with this theme if we're in PE, if we were looking at the performance of muscle groups. So a week ago Wimbledon was on, and tennis would have made a really good example. So here students could complete the homework or the analysis using real players while actually enjoying watching a sport that they want to look at. So I actually took these examples from our Promethean Planet user by using the keyword search tennis, and they all cut this is a full lesson, which I've put a link on here, and they all come with notes as well, which is fantastic just in case you don't know the answers. Okay, I'm going to spend some time now looking at planning and the amount of time it takes us to plan these lessons. So often we can have a fantastic lesson, but it took us as long to plan it, if not longer, than it did to actually deliver that lesson. And one of the great things about digital learning and learning through a whiteboard is that we can save our examples. And here we've got a simple jigsaw, which I've pre-planned with the names of my class underneath. So by clicking on one jigsaw piece, it'll disappear and I can see that it's Amy's turn to answer a question. And I can do it to either discover who's going to answer the question, like I did there, or I can do it who's going to do the next task, who's going to come up to the board, who's going to go and deliver the message to the head teacher. Whatever way I want to use this, once I've created it for my particular class, it's created and I can save it and bring it up whenever it's appropriate. So it's a really neat tool, really easy to use. Again, this can be found on Promethean Planet. But it's not just ideas like this which can support you in planning. By using a simple trick, which is drag a copy, here you can see that I've got my sentence builder with lots and lots of options on here. So I didn't have to make lots of pages when one would suffice. So by using the drag a copy feature, it's allowed me to create multiple sentences. So I can create here a cat, that, and I'd have to keep going. I haven't got on the mat, I keep going, but I've also got my punctuation down at the bottom. So we can constantly build new sentences by pulling different things out. So I can get my class used to creating sentences. What do we always need at the start of a sentence, class? That's right, a capital letter. What always comes at the end? The full stop. So let's move these up. So we're building and modelling on the board, and we haven't had to spend all that time. It's a really nice page to be able to practice, to repeat, to check. Save your planning checks understanding. This page shows something very similar. This is one that's all about a revision. Again, I put everything on one page, but I've used the ability to set things off my flip chart page so students can't see everything at once to my advantage. I can bring in the appropriate part that I want to revise from, and these are all set as containers, going all back the way to the beginning, and I can write in what these are, and then I can move that off the page and go to the next bit and pull this in. So for each bit we've got a different task, different activity, different set of learning, but all on the same page. So I didn't have to sit and make lots and lots of things. I thought about what it was that I was doing and put it all onto one activity. Now, a lot of things that I've shown you today can be found in our templates section. And the templates section can be found in your resource browser. If you open this up, if you're in the primary scheme, under Activities and Templates. And under Templates, you'll see a section called General, and you'll find all the different templated pages that we offer. So things like your Venn diagram, which I will find. Here we are, there's our Venn diagram. A timeline. Simple checking how our students are doing, all the way up to a bar graph, which I go right to the end for, that's preset so that I can manipulate these options. So you see there, I can move them up and down. What I love about this is all I'm having to do is alter and change the axes. I don't have to do anything else, so my planning's easy. I've created this and away I go. Do utilise the templates. If I was ever going to give you any piece of advice, if you had a spare half an hour, it would be to go into those sections and see what's already made for you. Don't spend time reinventing the wheel when it's already there. Finally then, the best area for pre-planning would be on Promethean Planet. Now, because you're on this webinar, I'm going to assume that you're already members of the website, but with over 70,000 plus resources already created, I'm sure that you can find something that you can use and edit for your learners without having to start from scratch. Now, we've already previously done a whole webinar on using existing content, so rather than repeat that, I'm just going to remind you that you can view that session on our YouTube channel, and that Planet is about more than just resources. We have public and private member groups. You can use it for social networking, be that Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn. You also have 1 GB of free storage online, so you can save files that you've created at home, upload them into your space, not the wider area, and download them at school, so it saves you having to carry them around on pen drives. It is now easier to join, and we do have lots of local relevant content, especially using the Partner Resources site. And finally, it is built for you and your community, so do use those forums and tell us what you want to see. Okay, I'm going to just do a quick recap then of things that I think that you should check before your lesson to make sure that you are going to hit that outstanding. So did you identify the knowledge of the student at the start of the lesson? Did you identify the knowledge during and after the lesson? Now, why we would do this is not just to check understanding, but also to create pace. We don't want to keep going with our lesson plan if after 15 minutes all the students have grasped the concept, because then we aren't showing progress enough for that ability range in our class. Were the examples that I used relevant, not just in the particular time, but also for my students and the curriculum? Did I tell my students what was expected of them, and did I show appropriate praise? And finally, did I allow for differentiation within that class? If you can answer yes to all of these, then you're well on your way to getting that outstanding that we all desire. So I hope that you found this session useful. I would like to remind you that you can review your skills using the Introduction to ActivInspire course. There are also additional material available to you through our Active Tips. So for both of those sections, you need to log in to Promethean Planet, visit Professional Development, and you're either accessing free courses or Active Tips. And Active Tips, remember, can be downloaded to your MP3 player, and make sure that you download the associated flip chart so you can practice those skills. There is a search functionality through there, so if you do want to search for something specific, do type that in. Finally, don't forget the Help menu in your software. It can be found up here, Help. So go and check out the contents. It's a really useful resource and very underused if you want to see how to look at something. Now, this, as I said, this is the last of our sessions for this year. We will be posting another set of titles up. If you do have any ideas, then please go onto our community area on Promethean Planet to submit those titles to us via the forum. We want to make these useful to you, so by utilising your knowledge, we can get you exactly what you want. Finally then, our contact details are on the screen. Both Janice and I are on Twitter, so please, we always like followers if you are part of that social media group. Thank you very much for listening to me, and hopefully we will hear from you soon.